Very good. I think this is just a great crowd for people on such an icky night. I almost wonder what it would have been like if the roads had been beautiful. Anyway, let me introduce you to a few people here that have been a great help that a lot of us don't really know. Till did. Okay. As you know, this was hosted by the 3 Northeastern DFL units. And back over there, Diane Parker, who's the chair of the Cook County DFL. Behind the camera over there against the wall is Kristin Larsen, who is from St. Louis County 06 DFL. St. Louis County is so big they have to divide it into 2 separate sections.
We got the good half.
Yeah, I agree with you. The closest one right along the border with Lake County. Anyways, and to introduce the moderator tonight is going to be Phil Arnold, and he's from Lake County, down to Harvest Way.
Thanks, Fran. I'm so excited about the questions. Yes. Go ahead. Introductory remarks.
Good evening, and my name is Rick Nolan, running for Congress here in the 8th District. And if you can hear me back there, okay, I'll dispense with the microphone. Okay, good. My family and I, we go back in this district about 5 generations. So I think we've got a good feel for what people in this district want and what they expect out of a representative, because they're the same thing that I want and my family wants and my neighbors want and expect. I've been deeply involved in government, in politics, in education, in volunteer community service, and in business in this district and throughout our community. I'm the immediate past president of our college foundation at the Central Lakes. We raise scholarship money for people of all ages. Used to own the sawmill and the pallet factory up in Emily. My kids own it today, and I get a check from them every once in a while. Every once in a while, somebody said, and I suppose you have to write one out to them once in a while too. But no, they're doing quite well. I served in the State House in the southern and western part of this district. And I also served in the Congress in some of the southern and the western part of this district. I did not expect to be running for Congress, quite frankly, at this stage of my life. But in my worst nightmares, I never thought I would see the country in the condition that it is in this stage of my life. And I don't mind saying that this country has been wonderfully good to my generation. And I just would not feel good about myself if I didn't step up to do what I could to turn this thing around. Campaigns are about hope. They're about the future. And that's what my campaign is about. There is a way to balance our budgets. There is a way to put people to work. There is a way to get this country moving again. And the way we do it is we stop by ending the wars of choice. Trillions of dollars have gone into that needs to go into rebuilding America. We need to establish some tax equity. Some of the super rich millionaires and billionaires pay little or no taxes. We need to do away with the Bush tax cuts and eliminate the tax loopholes that enable the richest and wealthy in this country to get by without paying any taxes. We need to pull back on the military footprint. More money for development. We need a single-payer, universal national health care plan. We need to strengthen Social Security, Medicare, collective bargaining. We need to change the way we do politics in this country. Corporations are not people. Money is not free speech. We need to reverse those decisions, provide public financing for campaigns, and perhaps that is the most important thing that we can do to keep big money and special interests from running this country. Thank you.
think I've gotten my wind down, and unlike Rick, I'm not as loud as Rick, so I'm going to use the microphone so all of you can hear me. I hope you can hear me just fine. As you know, I'm Tarryl Clark. I come from the southern part of the region. My husband Doug is sitting in the back. I married my best friend almost 27 years ago. We've got two great sons, Colin and Nathan. Colin works with young adults with autism spectrum disorders. Nathan is a political organizer. Doug's a longtime legal aid attorney. And we have served as high school youth ministers throughout the region. I worked for the Girl Scout Council throughout central and northeastern Minnesota. Now I work with the Blue-Green Alliance, some of you know that. I'm a national co-chair for a jobs program because we know we have got to first and foremost get our people back to work. I too am a former legal aid attorney. We have gone ahead and enjoyed the outdoors and the same values that all you do. And unlike Chip Cravaack, I have spent almost the last 25 years working on issues that affect all our families. What I hear from people every day is, can I afford to retire or stay retired? Can I send our kids to college? Can we afford to pay those student loans? Can I stay in my job? Can I stay in my house? Can I grow my small business? And those are some of the most critical things in front of us. And I'm the one in the race that has the experience on all of those issues. Those are things I'm passionate about and, again, have worked throughout central and northeastern Minnesota throughout almost the last 25 years. The other piece you should know is that I've been actively working on bringing people together in coalition. People who don't always agree on things, whether it's labor, fighting sometimes with the environment. I've got a strong labor and a strong environmental record. Whether it's being in the city area versus rural areas. Whether it's working on making sure we're doing things that are going to strengthen our communities, but we have different strategies. I strongly believe in what Harry Truman once said, which is, it's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. And that's really been my mantra throughout this time. Now, I believe there's two critically important issues in front of us, and there's many others, some of which Rick touched on. One is jobs. These folks sold us a bill of goods. They claimed they were going to go and work on getting jobs back, and what jobs have there been? The only jobs that have been created are outsourcing jobs to China and other places. We have got to stop that. We need to be growing our jobs here. Imagine if we were not only extracting, but we were building things like the turbines and making sure that we were shipping them out of the ports of Duluth instead of bringing in turbines from other countries. We can be making sure that we are growing and diversifying our economy. So second is making good on our promises. That's to our seniors, to our veterans, and to our kids. And I'm sure I'm going to get a chance to talk more about each of those three things. So I ask for your help and your support. I'm so glad you're here tonight and look forward to our conversation. I've almost caught my breath. I'm sure I know that next question.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My name is Jeff Anderson, and I am a fourth-generation Iron Ranger. My grandpa's grandpa came to this country from Finland in the 1880s to work in the iron mines of northern Minnesota. Washington, D.C. is terribly broken. I think all of you would agree. And that starts right here in the 8th Congressional District with our current representative, Chip Cravaack. Chip Cravaack is, as has been said earlier, one of these folks who went to Washington, D.C. saying that he was going to create jobs and represent the best interests of the people of the 8th Congressional District. But since he's been there, he's done nothing of the sort. Mr. Cravaack has voted to essentially end Medicare as we know it. He's been harmful to economic development in rural areas by not supporting programs like Essential Air Service and not being a partner for our local communities. We can do better. We need to do better. Priority number one this November is defeating Chip Cravaack. I have the experience to... Thank you. I have the experience and the electability to do just that. As someone who has been living here in the 8th Congressional District my whole life, who's a product of the Iron Range, who went to school at UMD in Duluth and was lucky enough to find a job and to be able to stay here and work in business for the past 17 years and to serve my community, to give back, to work as an elected official in the largest city in this district representing 87,000 Duluthians. I've got the experience in the public sector and the private sector, working on our Economic Development Authority. As president of both the City Council and Economic Development Authority, I've seen what good we can do, what good government can do, and how we can be a partner with business and create opportunity. It's what we have to do in this district, and we do not have that partner in Chip Cravaack. So in November, we're going to take back this seat. We're going to have someone in Washington, D.C. who represents the values of the 8th Congressional District, the values of you and me. Someone who's going to work towards job creation, someone who's going to work to protect the environment, someone who knows what's important. Our seniors can live in dignity and retire in dignity. Our children can go to world-class schools. That's the Minnesota I grew up in. That's the Minnesota and the America that we need to go back to. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening and to speak with you and to share my views on these important issues of our day. Thank you very much.
Okay, now for the first question. And Tarryl, you'll go first. Okay. In general, there is great concern with the influence of corporations and wealthy individuals on elections and influencing the actions of those who hold public office. What would you do to fix the problem?
Well, this is a key issue, certainly long before the horrible Citizens United decision came out. I have been a long and proud supporter of fair and clean elections. There's a lot of things we do really pretty well in our state system here. We have limits on how much you can spend if you're a legislative candidate. By and large, those things work, which means it really is about us as people. And so before I was ever elected, and I think many of you know that I won a special election, a Christmas election in December of 2005, and then was a legislative leader starting the next year, in spite of the fact we had Governor Pawlenty, and we can go into him some other time. But I can tell you, having brought the faith community together, nonprofits, labor, and others, we know that we can go ahead and change what the process is. But Washington really is, frankly, corrupt. And the fact that Chip Cravaack won't do a damn thing about standing up and changing this process is problematic. I can tell you that I plan on going and making sure that we're working not only to change our laws and have campaign finance reform, because that is something I've worked on, but also to make sure, frankly, that I think we're going to need a constitutional amendment. I absolutely love what John Stewart and Stephen Colbert have been doing. If you didn't see Justice Stevens on Stephen Colbert, please do so. You can go on our Facebook site and click on the link. This is serious issues. We only have to look at what's been happening in the Republican debates to see what's happening. So perhaps they're going to get hoisted on their own petard, as it were. But I will also say, I think we're the biggest antidote. So I'm not going to wait till we get to Washington. I mean, I've been talking about this since that decision came out. But part of what we have to do is make sure we're coming together, because they're not afraid of our money, frankly. What they're afraid of is all of us being active and us standing together side by side, making sure that we're the ones that are the human microphone, that we're the ones that are going to convince people that their voices matter. I think one of our biggest threats, in addition to the money, frankly, is people giving up hope and belief that Washington could be fixed. And if we don't start now, if we don't help people get that we can stand up and have people with small amounts of money or no money changing things, I don't see how we're going to stop them. I'm proud of the fact I outraised Cravaack last quarter, and it was on almost 5,000 people who did it. Tiny people, not the big corporations. So while he's being propped up by the likes of the Koch brothers, we're going to make sure this is a people-powered campaign that changes things in Washington.
I'll just stand here. I said this in my opening remarks. Washington, D.C. is broken, and it absolutely is, and money and corporations, I believe, are the root of that influence. In a country where we have the highest child poverty rate amongst industrialized nations, it's criminal. The amount of money that is spent on our political process, influencing politicians. We need to amend the Constitution to say that a corporation is not a person, that they do not have the same rights as you and me. As one of my last acts on the Duluth City Council in December, we passed a resolution calling for an amendment to the Constitution, becoming the first city in the state of Minnesota to pass such a resolution. I think that's important, and while at times I've been criticized at the local level for bringing forward these national issues, I think it's important that at a grassroots level, a city council, a county board, we tell politicians in Washington and in St. Paul what matters to us, and it's that a corporation does not have the same rights and influences on the political process. We need campaign finance reform. We need to publicly fund federal elections. We can do it. We can make this process bigger, or better, rather, and that's the key to doing these other things, the key to helping to take health care reform further and to doing these other things that need to be fixed in this country. We have to fix the way we run our elections and the influence and money that's involved, and changing the Constitution in regards to corporate personhood is one of the first things that we need to do.
Thank you. And I'm glad that was the first question, because as I said in my opening remarks, that's singularly the most important thing we have to do. If we want to wrestle control of our government and our politics away from big money and big corporations, we have to take away corporate personhood. We have to reverse the decision that money is free speech, and we have to provide public funding for our campaigns and elections. And that's all how you change the way business is getting done in Washington. But secondly, you should all know, you've heard the statement, everybody's campaigning and nobody's governing, which is true substantively. It's also true literally. The Congress doesn't meet anymore. They go to work at Tuesday night at 6 o'clock and they have some scheduled votes. And then when they don't finish up on Tuesday night, they finish up on Wednesday, and they go back home and they start campaigning. They should be meeting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, getting to know each other, talk about the issues, find where there's some agreement, find where they can solve some problems, and get something done. And that needs to be changed so that they go back to work. Lastly, I failed to introduce my best friend in life for the last 30-some years, and my wife of the last 27, who has been in business, Red Cross, National Marrow Donor. She was doing she worked for Planned Parenthood. She was organizing a fundraiser for him the night they firebombed the Planned Parenthood Center in our hometown. My wife, Mary. Would you stand up? Yeah. Thank you.
I don't have as loud a voice, so I got to use this. Okay, the next question, which Jeff will lead on. Many proposals to improve the quality of jobs and wages in our region are based on extraction of resources. In some instances, these proposals divide our communities. All of us care about the environment, as well as the creation of living wage jobs. What are your proposals to increase the number of good-paying jobs without dividing our communities?
That's a great question, because that is the defining issue right now in the 8th Congressional District. So it's jobs, economic opportunity. As I said, I was able to stay in Duluth and in northern Minnesota because I found a job. So many times our greatest export from this part of the state is our young people who go elsewhere to find that economic opportunity. Our economy is based on timber, taconite, and tourism. It really is. Mining, forestry, logging, and tourism are all very important. And we can't do something in one of those legs that's going to damage one of the others. I do believe, though, that we have to be supportive of all three of those legs of industry, while at the same time looking for other areas by which to expand and create jobs. There was mention of the divisiveness of, say, copper-nickel mining, which is certainly a controversial issue, and it should be. Because if we're going to move forward with any projects like that, it needs to be done right. It needs to be done within the current confines of the law. And I'm not an either-or person. I believe that we can do that and do it safely, but it has to be proven such. In terms of other economic opportunities in northeastern Minnesota, we need to start manufacturing things again in this country, and we need to start manufacturing things here in Minnesota. There's no reason that we're extracting these resources from the ground and shipping them elsewhere to be manufactured. We can do that right here. We also have to continue to support successful industries like education, healthcare, aviation, all things that are important in the 8th Congressional District. It is all about jobs, but again, we can't do it at the sake of threatening one particular, growing one particular industry or leg of industry at the sake of another. You want the mic? No.
Two things. I addressed how I think we do it on public policy. We stop the nation building abroad and start rebuilding America, taking care of the unmet human needs that we have in this country, whether it be helping a poor kid get through college or a challenged child get through school, and whatever it takes to realize their full potential. We also need to change our trade policy. We lost 50,000 manufacturers, millions of jobs. I've been involved in export trade. Other nations incentivize, through trade and tax policies, manufacturing to stay where they are. On a practical level, I provided a lot of jobs. I bought a sawmill that was going out of business, turned it around, and it's a good, prosperous little enterprise now. I helped create 120 to 150 jobs right here in Lake and Cook County. When Bluefin Bay couldn't get off the ground, a couple of friends of mine came to me and asked them if I would help them, and I managed to get the approvals and get that project underway. And if you don't believe it, go over there and order breakfast. They got oatmeal Nolan on the menu in honor. So that's my claim to fame. I was the founder, creator of the Minnesota World Trade Center Corporation, a $100 million project, created hundreds of good-paying union jobs, helped Minnesota companies export their goods, export their products. I've been involved in job creation on a practical level and on a policy level. All my life, I want to bring those experiences, that ability that I've been blessed with to bring people together, to solve problems, get things done, put people back to work in this country, and in the process, improve the quality of our lives and help us all feel better about being an American and the promise that it offers. Thank you.
So how many of you liked what you heard the president talking about the other night? It was a good start, wasn't it? Yeah. And that's exactly the kind of plan I've been working on for the last year. After the last election, it was pretty obvious the right is absolutely trying to splinter all of us. They're trying to tear our people apart. They've tried to convince us all and sold Americans a bill of good that you either can have jobs or you can have an environment. You can't have both. But we know better. And so I've been partnering with the Blue-Green Alliance, as I said, since the last election, bringing people the likes of the Sierra Club and the Steelworkers together and others, saying we can actually grow our jobs and make sure they're sustainable. And everything that the president was talking about is what we've been out promoting, and we can make it happen. We lost 7 million jobs in our country alone during the recession. We lost over 150,000 manufacturing jobs alone in Minnesota. And a lot of what we could be doing differently now is really about Greater Minnesota, and it's about giving people the belief we can change things. Now, clearly, with a divided Congress, okay, it's not really divided, is it? With a more than polarized Congress, we need to also make sure that we're going to be persistent and patient and have a lot of tenacity and not give up. And I can tell you that's a big part of what I think we have to do as a strategy, is we can't be giving up. We're sitting right now in a county with the second lowest broadband reach in the state. And I think we need a rural strategy. Washington has entirely forgotten about rural America. It hasn't really been since rural electrification. But if we could go ahead and be making sure we're having high-speed connections throughout Greater Minnesota, if we're doing what Jim was doing on transportation, which is something I've done a lot of work on, if we were making sure, as I indicated before, that we were diversifying and expanding manufacturing, using renewable energy and expanding that, making sure we're retrofitting our public buildings, and making sure, frankly, that our kids, like has been the promise in Minnesota, are getting a good education. We will then be able to be the ones that are going to provide the jobs that we need so our kids and our grandkids are able to live here. Oops, I'm sorry. I should have handed it back to you.
All right, on to question number 3. Many feel that everyone should have access to basic needs, for example, food, shelter, health care, education, safety, clean environment. Some have argued that taxpayers should not provide these basics, that people who have made poor choices or are unwilling to work should suffer the consequences. What basic needs do you think society should provide, and how would you incorporate the element of personal responsibility? And let's see, that would be Rick first up on that one.
Okay. Well, you know, now you're talking about the fundamental philosophy of what government is. Every man for himself, every woman for herself, every individual self, or are we in it together? I have been one of those who has always believed that government can be an incredibly powerful force for good or for evil. And it's not a matter of whether or not we have more government or less government or big government or small government. It's about having good government. It's about having effective government that's as good as its people and recognizes that we're all in this together. None of us know who's going to live long enough to need a pension. None of us are more than a breath or a step away from an accident or an illness that could bankrupt us and put us in great need of health care. All of us have enormous potential if given the opportunity to exercise it. So I am a firm believer, the John Locke philosophy, not the Thomas Hobbes philosophy, that we have together as a community an obligation to see to it that everyone has quality health care, that everyone has an equal educational opportunity, that everyone has equal opportunity for quality housing, and that everybody receives a return for the labor that they put forward in a degree that is commensurate with their ability to live comfortably. And that's how you release individual potential. That's how you release individual energy. That's how excitement occurs in a society. And that's the kind of philosophy I believe in. That's the kind of government that I believe in. That's what I've always believed. That's what I will always fight for, because that's what makes a country great. And that's what brings out all the best in everybody. Thank you.
Why don't we hold applause until kind of the end?
So I start off counseling at-risk teenagers, and I can tell you every day that I went to work, I saw families that were really struggling. There was substance abuse, there was sexual abuse, there was homelessness, there was a lot of different issues that were going on. But I also can tell you that I saw families working as hard as they could to make a difference for their families every single day. But no matter how much they tried, oftentimes there were system barriers. Purely system barriers. So honestly, the whole reason why I do the work I do is I go back to thinking about the kids that I worked with and their families, and the kids and the families and the seniors and veterans that I've worked with for over the last 25 years. I believe, as Teddy Roosevelt once said, that the government is us, you and me, and that people have a right to be expected. They're going to have an opportunity to have safe, affordable housing, that people should have a safe place to sleep at night. That we have an opportunity that when we're working full-time, that we're going to earn enough to make our families' ends meet. That we're going to have an opportunity for our kids to do better than we did. We have an opportunity to retire in dignity, and if we've served our country, that we get the benefits that we deserve. It's really pretty plain and simple. For me, it's all about how do we strengthen our families and our communities, and sometimes government absolutely messes things up. I've done a lot of work with Head Start. It is the most overregulated program in the country. 1,800 performance standards, none of which have to do with early literacy. Let's make sure sometimes that government is getting out of the way when it needs to, but that we have the opportunities, because let's face it, there's a lot of ways that each one of us can't afford to go ahead and do the things we'd like to on our own. But if we're pooling our resources, we can do that. I believe that we should be expecting to find ways to get every penny out of every dollar that we get from our taxpayers, and that we should frankly have performance reviews and standards so that we know whether we're getting what we pay for. And that's part of what I went to the Capitol here to work on, and that's part of what I'm going to do in Washington. As a progressive person, I think it's important taxpayers know that what we're doing works. And if it doesn't work, then we should change it. And if it really doesn't work, we should stop it and try something else. And together we can make that happen. Here we go.
Here we go. Thank you. I grew up in Ely in the late 1970s and early 80s. My dad was a miner at Mintac. He was laid off. And our family struggled. We struggled an awful lot. I remember as a kid, myself and my sisters waiting in line with my mom at the elementary school to get government commodity cheese and powdered milk. I remember my mom, at times, my mom and dad having to rely on fuel assistance to make ends meet. I remember my mom making us drive from Ely to Virginia to use food stamps on a few occasions because she was not wanting to see anyone in Ely having to see her use them. And so at an early age, I learned a lot about compassion and a lot about what government can do to help people when they're down on their luck through no fault of their own. And so I believe that government has a place in helping to take care of all of us. We have a responsibility to take care of our brothers and sisters. This is what we're here to do. This is what government should be here to do, to help create opportunities for job creation and economic development, but to have that safety net so that children, so that people who are out of a job, so that older Americans have the basic needs that we spoke about in the question. I believe that health care is a fundamental right, and that in this country, while the Affordable Health Care Act was wonderful, it didn't go far enough. I believe that we have got to stop turning our backs on the most vulnerable Americans. I talked about the child poverty rate in this country. Right now tonight in St. Louis County, in Northeastern Minnesota, there will be children that go to bed hungry because they have not had 3 meals. There are children that will go to bed without a permanent roof over their head. They're staying in some sort of shelter or perhaps no shelter at all. And that, in this day and age, is criminal. That in the country that boasts the greatest wealth in the history of the world, we would have such a thing happen. And so government has got to play a very important role in providing those basic needs for all of our for all Americans and all of America. And I think I'm preaching to the choir talking about this subject to all of you because you know how important this is. And as a congressman, I'm going to fight to make sure that we work to eliminate poverty, that we work to eliminate childhood hunger, that we don't turn our backs on the most vulnerable Americans at their most vulnerable hour.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, question number 4. And this is going to be, there's going to be a couple questions on this topic just because this is kind of important to the area, and the group that put the questions together felt like it was worth, they couldn't overemphasize it so much. Okay. One strategy mining companies employ when laws make it difficult to mine profitably is to seek change in ownership or management of lands, and therefore change the laws or regulations that apply to a particular area. The current representative recently announced that he supports an 88,000-acre land exchange involving state and federal property. Would you support such transfers in ownership or management of lands that will change which laws apply to lands within the Duluth complex, including the Weeks Act, in the next 10 years? If so, what agencies and organizations would you commit to working with in formulating such a plan? And let's see, on this one, Tarryl is the first one up.
And I probably should say it's Tarryl. I'd like to joke that once I make 7 figures, I could be called Tarryl. I just don't make enough money yet. And my mom made up my name, so for what that's worth. She was pregnant when my dad was in the Navy. She spent a lot of time coming up with names. I would have been Mark if I'd been a boy. Go figure. You know, this is our land, our water, our way of life is critically important to who we are. And sometimes things just get really muddy really fast, and especially when you're not sure, somebody's trying to pull a fast one on us, right? Doesn't it feel that way sometimes? And I can tell you, since I've worked on some of these issues recently in St. Paul, you sometimes wonder when who's coming in, whose interests are they really representing? And so I can tell you that I tend to work a bit differently than most elected officials. It's probably because I came out of the advocacy community. I believe that I should be an advocate and a partner. And when you're raising concerns, I want to make sure that you're coming and telling me if you've got an idea about how we change things, that we work on that. I'm really proud of a lot of the laws that we have that are about our habitat. You know, I made sure that we had an opportunity to do the legacy amendment, although I thought it should have been, frankly, legislatively done, not through the amendment process. But as people, we care about that, and that's true throughout the state. There are people who don't live in this region who absolutely get the problems that are here, though. And so there's a number of questions that I keep thinking are in there, including things like the school trust fund and what's happening when it's somebody's private land. And I think it's important that before I would go and vote on anything, that we be looking directly together about what its impact is and what those laws are. So I can tell you I have a very strong environmental record, and as I said, I have a strong job creation record as well. I get concerned when you've got people in Washington making decisions that really are about what we need to be doing. Now, we have had some times over the last several years where it has made some sense for the state to be buying additional land, and I think that that's been appropriate. And I think we need to be going through our own processes for that. So, I'm not trying to sound like I'm skirting anything. I just know this is complicated, and we have some problems with several of the things that you haven't even just mentioned that relate to land swaps, among other things. So let's make sure that we are doing no harm, that our good laws in Minnesota are in place and used, that people are changing what the rules are in the middle of the game. That happens a lot, right? And that we, regardless of if there's a good deal to be swapping, that we're making sure it's the right deal for our region.
Absolutely. We've got to do these things right. We only get one shot on many of these things, and when it comes to Congressman Cravaack's proposal, I don't support his proposal. I'm someone who supports the rights of property owners, and we talked about mineral rights in Ely the other day, and I support the rights of property owners when it comes to the mineral rights that they own, and we should protect those rights so that if we want to have mining and we want to have land swaps or land acquisition, it needs to be done properly. It needs to be done within the letter of the law. It needs to be done fairly and safely. And so we can talk about land swaps that may benefit the school trusts, which does have a benefit to some extent on schools like the University of Minnesota Duluth. The National Natural Resources Research Institute obtains funding from that trust. We've got to be careful, and Congressman Cravaack's proposal, in my opinion, is not the right way to go about it. We need to be fair and principled and protect property owners' rights and do what's right for all Minnesotans who are property owners of state-owned land and protect our land. Again, when we talk about mining, and I imagine there's going to be more questions on the mining issue, I'm someone who's running for Congress in the 8th Congressional District. I want to do whatever we can to embrace proposals that are going to create jobs, potentially thousands of jobs. But again, we have to do it right. We have to do it the right way, being environmentally conscious. And as a kid who grew up in the Boundary Waters canoe area, that's where we went for vacations because we didn't have any money to go anywhere else. I want to make sure we do everything to protect those lands and to keep them as natural and pristine as possible so that we're not creating economic opportunities at the expense of our environment.
Well, I would endorse what Jeff and Tarryl have said here as well. Before I address it, though, in answer to your question, of course you want to sit down with the state, you want to sit down with the county, you have to sit down with the Department of Interior, you have to sit down with the Park Service, you want to bring in private groups like the Friends of the Boundary Waters or the Conservation Federation, as well as property landowners. And so you get all the stakeholders at the table, look to see what the consequences are for everybody that's involved, and then make a good judgment. Now, on this particular land swap, I have not had an opportunity to do that. So I can't, like Jeff or Tarryl, I can't offer a judgment on it at this moment in time, but that's how I would go about that process. And I have had some background and experience in that sort of thing. And I know I catch hell for every time I bring this up for people, but damn it, I'm proud of it. I was a sponsor in the House of Representatives of the final resolution that created the Boundary Waters Wilderness Canoe Area. So I've got some background in that, and that was one of those cases where we had to bring a lot of different people and a lot of competing interests together in order to make that happen. But if I've been blessed with a skill One of them is to be able to bring people together, solve some problems, and get things done. And that's what we do on a land swap like this.
Okay, question number 5, which will be the last one before the break. The internet is playing a larger and bigger role in our lives every day. The free exchange of information has almost been taken for granted. Today, dictators have been overthrown partially because of this free exchange. Yet some internet service providers would like to control who its customers are able to contact and do business with. This could result in control of the internet going to the highest bidder and the free exchange of ideas being inhibited. On the other hand, intellectual property rights are also important. What role should federal legislation and regulation play in controlling or keeping the internet free? And for this one, Jeff is the first up.
I'll be quick in my answer. SOPA, I'm against it. I don't think that we have to keep the internet as free as possible, as free and the choices that people have as free and independent as possible. I heard a story on Minnesota Public Radio this morning about how Twitter has developed new software that allows some countries to screen out content. I think that's ridiculous, and it should never happen in this country. The internet should be a free place for all to roam, whether we agree with some of the content or not. In America, we have the in my opinion, the constitutional rights to be able to access this information. Information is power, and when we start to take away that access to information, we're starting to head down a road that we don't want to go down. So that's my position. We need to work hard to make sure that these attacks on internet freedom are thwarted.
Let's see, Rick is next.
Yeah, I would be vehemently opposed to anything that involves censorship. Having said that, do we have to find some ways to protect copyrights and property rights? Yes, of course we do, but not if it involves censorship. And I'll tell you something else I'm deeply disturbed and concerned about, and that is the level of government involved in censoring our activities under the current law. The President and the Congress recently enacted legislation that gives the President of the United States of America to arrest anybody who's suspected of being terrorist and not giving them their day in the court. There is nothing more fundamentally un-American than that. One of the things that has always distinguished us, America was a place where you got your day in court. But the fact is the government, in many cases, is listening to our telephone calls. The government is monitoring our internet communications. And we need to put a stop to that. That is not American, it is un-American, and we need to stop it. Thank you.
Oh, you want I know. Well, I obviously agree with certainly much, if not all, of what's been said. I mean, I think there's several different pieces. I mean, this has been our newer frontier, and it's a lot of ways our ability and ways of being able to communicate, that is, if we actually have broadband or anything else, right? So, because we know that our communications keep dropping on us in many ways. But we know that technology in many ways has outstripped our laws. And that's part of the problem, is Congress can't figure out how to agree to pass more than 2 months of a payroll tax cut for us, let alone figure out how to do this right. So first off, net neutrality is critically important. That's even prior to the SOPA issue. I think it's important that we have that. Second, our freedom of speech should be there. And third, I do think it's important that we're finding ways to have our laws, our ability to enforce our current laws. And I think privacy is also a major issue as it relates to the internet. I think my data should be private and I should have control about it. Where I go, I should be the one that determines it. And it was kind of encouraging to see this Supreme Court just come out with a decision finally saying that cops couldn't just go and use GPS to figure out where people they were suspicious of. Now, I think we need to be going after bad guys. I think we need to be going after terrorists. The problem is those laws affect all of us. And the good thing is the decision that they reached unanimously, and which is kind of interesting given who we're talking about, is also saying that perhaps there's other ways that technology has been used to invade our privacy and our lives. So let's keep our speech free. Let's make sure we can use the internet in a way that normal people, regular folks, you and me, not just big corporations, get to control who's being able to be sought after online. And let's make sure our privacy is intact as well.
All right, we're ready to resume with question number 6. Today's use of fossil fuels is adding to climate change and is a source of conflict between nations throughout the world. Solutions include better mass transportation, like the Northern Lights Express, and increased use of renewable energy. What do you hope to do as the 8th District Congressperson to decrease our reliance on fossil fuels and to move our nation away from the ravages of increased global warming? And let's see. Rick is the first one up.
Sure. Well, I don't mind telling you, having served 3 terms in the Congress, should I win the election, I will show up as a 4th-term member of Congress with my seniority. And should the Democrats gain control of the House of Representatives, why, it's not uncommon for members with that kind of seniority to actually have a subcommittee chairmanship. And, of course, as many of you know, that's where the real work of the Congress is done. My intentions are to seek a spot on the Transportation Committee should I get elected. I don't mind telling you, probably my first love of life is agriculture, and I served on that committee in the past, and I love it. But I think the future is all about climate change and about transportation. I envision an America where all the major cities are connected with rapid rail transit. And where from those major centers, there are spikes going out into the communities and feeding a larger system. I've seen the numbers. I've seen the studies. It's a huge investment. Going to create thousands and thousands of jobs. But guess what? It's far less expensive than the anticipated future cost of air transportation. It consumes a fraction of the energy in the fuel that air transportation costs, and it's certainly safer and it's more convenient. And what an exciting thing that would be for this country to embark upon. I think that was always Jim Oberstar's vision. I don't want to pretend to speak for him, but it certainly is my vision. And lastly, with regard to fossil fuels and climate change, make no mistake about it. I mean, the best minds in the world have concluded a simple truth, and the facts to back them up. Climate change threatens the survival of our species here on Earth. And nobody's talking about it because they're afraid they might offend somebody. What the hell is this? This has to be on the front burner to make the conversion, whether it be in transportation, in energy collection, energy production, energy distribution. We have to find the alternatives to the fossil fuels that threaten our species here on this earth. Thank you.
Well, I believe in God and I believe in science, and having run against and served with some of the biggest science deniers in the state and the country, I know something about what it's like to take these folks on. I think it's time that we return to our proper role of stewards of the earth we've been given, and not just from 2,000 years ago, as I think Congressman Bachman likes to say. Now, I am proud of the fact that these are issues I've been working on for quite a long time, and I'm really excited. Minnesota is so well poised to be the leader in this country, and we just need a little bit of help from the feds. You know, truly, in the future, the question is, are we going to be getting our energy from the Middle East or from the Midwest, and particularly Minnesota? You know, we could go ahead and be getting to the next generation of fuel so that we're not just using corn grown for humans or for cows, right? That we're talking about cellulosics and switchgrass, so we can move that way. That helps our agricultural areas, but we can do that. We could go ahead and expand on our nation studying renewable energy standard that I helped get in place by making sure that we're growing renewable technologies. We know right now that we've got at least 50 manufacturers, mostly small businesses throughout greater Minnesota, that would like to retool what they're doing so that they're bringing down their energy costs and their overhead, but they can put and expand back into the labor to be hiring more people within their business. We can do that now. The transportation infrastructure is huge. I'm proud to have been part of making sure we overrode Governor Pawlenty on our transportation bill. That was a good start. But you know, Chip Cravaack, he's out there claiming that he's about cost containment on transportation. What does that really mean? Let's cut out everything that makes sense, like Northern Lights, which I've been working on. Like things like making sure that Rainier, which is now the busiest North American rail crossing, that we're not using that in the way we could be. So let's be making sure that we're focusing and starting on coming back and getting the kinds of credits that are going to grow our jobs here, not overseas. And this is important because Germany, in the wake of Fukushima, has decided they want to be the first industrialized country to be really having the clean energy economy. Well, these shouldn't be them, it should be us. So let's make sure that we're finding the ways to be expanding renewable energy, doing the things with transit and other kinds of transportation infrastructure that makes sense. Let's make sure we're expanding our manufacturing so we're the ones that, again, that are building those wind turbines. And I will say, I didn't believe in waiting for seniority. And with all due respect, Keith Ellison, Congressman Walz, and Michelle Bachmann all have that amount of experience too. And I think it's important that we're going to go in, stay put, go ahead and go after these folks. And as someone who's had to go ahead and work with right-wing Tea Partiers, I have a pretty good idea how you get something done, whether you're in the majority or whether you're serving with people who are also of different minds in the majority themselves.
Bottom line is, in this country right now, we have no energy policy, and we haven't for quite a while. And it's evident when you look at the policies coming out of Washington, D.C. One of the things I want to work on as congressman is coming up with that energy policy, an energy policy that invests in taking our reliance off of fossil fuels and off of foreign fuels and investing in clean technologies here in the United States. Things, again, that can be manufactured in the United States. Things that can be built here in northern Minnesota. Solar technology, wind technology. I was at Mesabi Range Technical College yesterday during their wind program, wind energy program, one of two in the state of Minnesota. We need to invest in that type of technology to take away from our dependence on foreign oil. Now, the other thing that we need to do is invest in responsible transportation. And as a city councilor in Duluth, I have been an outspoken advocate for the Northern Lights Express and have each year fought against those who don't believe in it to make sure that the city of Duluth contributes money to the study and is a part of the working group. That is so important for the future of northern Minnesota. And people who are opposed to it are not thinking 25, 50, 100 years out, because the price of gasoline is not going to go down. It's going to continue to rise. So we need to invest in transportation that's not only clean and efficient, but it's also the right thing to do in terms of connectivity for the state of Minnesota. It's why we need to be supportive of our ports. Being able to ship things out of the port of Duluth is, again, efficient and effective. We need to invest in those types of transportation modes. We need to invest in new and clean technologies for energy production, and we need to provide tax incentives to do that. We need to be a partner to make it so that small and mid-sized and large businesses can make that energy transition over to solar or to wind. We need to provide tax incentives, more tax incentives for individual homeowners and property owners to make that transition from from electricity that we have now to wind energy and to solar energy. So that's the type of energy policy we need, and we need it quickly because we don't have the luxury of time when it comes to climate change and other pollution that's affecting our globe.
Thank you. Okay, on to question number 7. Most experts say Social Security would be easy to fix if done soon. Would these be a priority for you if elected, and how would you go about getting it off the dime?
This is critically important, and I can't figure out why on earth the Tea Party has fallen into believing that the Ryan plan somehow is good for them, or that somebody like Chip Cravaack is actually going to stand up for them. We've seen what's happened with Wall Street, and I think for most of us, what's happened to our own separate retirement. I can tell you right now, I want to make sure that we're going to stabilize it, and I'm not going to privatize it. I think it's unreasonable and it's irresponsible to let Wall Street be touching those funds. I don't know about for all of you, but Doug and I, frankly, several times over the last few years have stopped opening our reports on our 401s or our nonprofit retirement plans because I can tell you, half of it's gone. Half of it's gone. And I know many seniors who have postponed or had retirement or had gone back to work. But here's the thing with the Tea Partiers, this is our money. It's our money. We have been putting aside money every single day of our working lives. So I don't understand why they aren't stronger on this issue. I am proud to have the support and endorsement and already been out campaigning with the National Security to protect Social Security and Medicare. I think it's in large part because I'm a former senior law attorney. I've been a senior advocate at the legislature. I have worked on many issues. And I got to tell you, if we do one simple thing, and that's make sure that everybody is paying the same rate on the payroll tax, we'd be okay. And purely, but it's not a Ponzi scheme. It's not filled with feathers, like one of our representatives has said. This is an important part about who we are. So when I talk about making sure we're keeping our promises, this is a key part of this. The right is trying to convince us that this is something we need to be worried about. So let me tell you a real quick story. Last year I was out shaking hands with people before a football game, and I had a teacher, a retired teacher with me. She first started working in 1969, and she said when she first started working, she went to sign up for Social Security, and she was told at that point, you need to do something else, because you will not get this when you retire. They've been telling us since the 60s that this is not going to be there for us when we retire. Well, if they keep trying to go ahead and take it away, if they keep trying to make sure that we're not putting the money in, that could be a problem. But if we're standing together and we don't let them get away with saying that this isn't something that is secure and that it's not a part of who we are, we can make the difference. But when you have somebody like Cravaack running around telling people that we can do this differently and that somehow it's going to be okay, well, it won't be. For a number of us in this room, we won't be able to count on it. It is the one part of the anti-poverty strategy that has been intact and has made a difference. And while there are many seniors that's the only revenue they have to live on, income they have to live on, that's the only reason why they're able to live with any type of independence or dignity. So let's work and go ahead and strengthen it together.
Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the GI Bill, Pell Grants, these are all important programs that are part of the fabric of the society we live in. These are programs that we need to stand up and defend and to work to protect, to preserve, to invest in for future generations because they work, but they're not going to work if we privatize them. They're not going to work if we cut back on them, and they're not going to work if we allow the wealthiest Americans not to pay their fair share. So we can start by stabilizing Social Security by making sure that all Americans are contributing to Social Security on every dollar that they make. Why should someone who makes $35,000 a year contribute on every dollar that they make, but someone who makes $300,000 does not? And I know the argument, but my argument is we live in a civil society where we all have shared responsibilities and we take care of each other. Because no senior citizen should be expected to choose between their prescription drugs and their fuel oil or their food. I, for 9 years, was on the board of directors for Second Harvest Northern Lakes Food Bank. I deliver boxes of food through the NAPS program, a federal assistance type of program to help get food to elderly folks in need. And I've seen the tears in these people's eyes when you bring them a box of food, because now that isn't something they have to worry about, because they are struggling to make ends meet and to live in dignity in their later years. We need to strengthen these programs for the future, that so my generation and generations beyond me don't have to worry about it. Let's work to fix them, not privatize them. Let's work together to get this done, because can you imagine America without Social Security? Can you imagine an America where we don't take care of each other and our most vulnerable citizens? I can't, and I don't want to. And in Congress, I'll work to make sure we stabilize and ensure these programs for the long term.
Make no mistake about it, we know why the Republicans want to privatize Social Security and Medicare. They want to turn Social Security over to Wall Street. They want to get their grubby hands on that and use that for their gambling episodes. And in the case of Medicare, I mean, the insurance companies want to get their hands on that. I mean, you don't need to be a mental giant to figure this one out. Social Security is probably one of the best things that we have ever done in this country. Lifted more people out of poverty than any other thing singularly that we have done. And it is not an entitlement. It is an earned benefit that people started paying for the very first day, the very first hour that any one of us ever went to work. People have earned those benefits with the expectation that they'd live long enough to enjoy them, and they're damn well going to get them, if I have anything to say about it, I'll tell you that. Now, that's not to say, that there can't be some changes. Tarryl talked about, we can raise the limit on the amount. In fact, we should lift the limit on the amount that can be taxed. I've seen numbers that say that would solve 95% of the problem. I am against raising the retirement age. There are too many in my family and my neighborhood who have worked hard in the woods, in the factories. Hell, they can't. They're having a hard time making it to 63, let alone 73. That is off the table as far as I'm concerned. Medicare, yeah, there's some things we can do. We can start by revising this Medicare Part D. Let the government negotiate for those pharmaceutical prices. That can lower the cost of that program. And there's a fair amount of fraud, and there's a fair amount of abuse that with a few little things that we can adjust, that we can make the fund more secure. But absolutely, under no circumstances can we or should we change Social Security and Medicare. And let me just lastly say, we should all be so lucky to have programs like Social Security. It has a $2.5 trillion surplus in it. $2.5 trillion. And it just astonishes me that these Republicans can look at something with a $2.5 trillion surplus in it and then tell us that's what's causing all of our financial problems. I mean, you've got to be an idiot to believe this stuff. You've got to be listening to Rush Limbaugh or somebody. This fund has never failed to make a payment, and it has never failed to yield at least a modest profit. It's the best damn thing we ever did, and we're going to keep it.
Thank you.
Great
Question
audience.
number 8. People are concerned about access to health care. Many see the Affordable Health Care Act as a major step forward, whereas others fear the changes it encompasses. How will you help ensure that health care needs of Minnesotans, young and old, in the 8th Congressional District are addressed, and that affordable health care is available for everyone? And Jeff, you're up on this one.
It's a great question. I believe that health care is a fundamental right here in this country. I believe in a universal, single-payer health care system. The Affordable Health Care Act was a step in the right direction. As I said earlier, though, I don't think it's gone far enough to ensure health security for all Americans. We can do better. With that said, with the Affordable Care Act, rather than listen to these Tea Party folks who get so emotional about repealing it because it's going to destroy our country and ruin businesses, let's believe in it and fix the problems that might arise as we go along. Because you know what? Making sure that you can't be refused health insurance because of a pre-existing condition is a pretty darn good reform. Making sure that a kid graduating from college in a challenging economy who can't get a job, who now can stay on his parents' health insurance for a little longer, that's a good thing. I have a sister who, 25 years old, had to have her back fused because of a degenerative disc disease. Had she not been able to be on my parents' health insurance for that surgery, it would have bankrupted her as she tried to get a start in this world. That's wrong. We need to make sure that we take care of all Americans, especially our children, especially our retired Americans, and we need to move further and go farther with health care reform. But I have to say I'm very proud of our president, and I'm very proud of leaders like Jim Oberstar, who had the courage to vote for it. This is a debate that's been going on since the days of Teddy Roosevelt, and we finally did something about it. That, in and of itself, is a reason for this president to be reelected and for us to send leaders to Washington, to Congress, who are going to support that type of bold reform, because we can do more of it and make this country better and take care of more Americans.
Yeah, I too will resist any efforts to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and but my singular focus, which has been my singular focus all my life, is for a single-payer, universal, national health care plan. That's what I'll fight for, and that's what I'll work for. And by God, we're going to achieve it sooner or later. The country has to. And I think we're getting ready for it. We're getting close. So now's not the time to back off or retreat. Now's the time to make that last push. And we're going to get there. Thank you.
So when I was pregnant with our oldest son, Colin, and this was a little bit ago, like I said, he's 26 now, we didn't have family health care coverage. I had health coverage through the place I worked. Doug actually didn't yet have health care coverage. And the only way that my delivery would have been covered is if we needed an emergency C-section. Thank God we didn't. But what it meant was we had to shop around town to find a doctor that would let us kind of pay as we went. And we had to prepay for the hospital. And that's a much longer story. But what happened when I was in labor is the nurse tried to give me oxygen. And frankly, I batted her away because I was afraid we couldn't afford to pay for it. No one in America should go through that. And for the first time ever, because of the Affordable Care Act, many of us sitting in this room don't have an pre-existing condition because we're women. And for the first time ever, millions of American women are going to be able to get affordable prenatal and delivery care. And that's a very big deal. It also means that people like our younger son, Nathan, who thankfully he has a job, that doesn't have health care, he can still get health care because of our insurance. Those things are big deals. Now, this is an issue that I have worked on for at least the last 25 years. And for me, it started off, I was working with a young woman who was pregnant. It was a horrible situation. She was a victim of incest. But at that time, she couldn't get health care because if you were on AFDC at the time and you were a minor, you couldn't get health insurance. Well, I was able to go and help get her health coverage, but that meant there was a whole bunch of other people out there that couldn't get it. The system just purely hasn't worked. This is a step forward. But this is something in Minnesota we know something about. You know, before things got crazy down in St. Paul, we put into place, under Governor Carlson, Minnesota Care, which for the first time meant many working families were able to get health care coverage when they didn't. And if you had a pre-existing condition, we had MSHA. There's a lot of things we have been able to do, and I'm going to take the experience I've had working on senior health care, with Medicare, with Medicaid, with ways that we have gone ahead and been able to move the ball forward on health care in this state to do it in Washington. Frankly, the most important thing that they found out is they didn't die because they did health care. But we're not done. And for me, I favor Medicare for all. I think it is probably one of the things that most Americans could get for a moment there. It looked like we were going to get that. Medicare has one of the smallest administrative rates at about 2%. It's a good bang for our buck. I believe that we should be negotiating across the board for our prescription drugs. It's absolutely crazy that they didn't do this in the law. The VA does it. They have much lower rates on prescription drugs than the rest of us do. And frankly, one of the things we got to work on, because no matter who you are, costs keep going up too much because of the health care plans. We have got to go ahead and be bringing down health care costs, period. I've taken on the insurance companies, and I've won. And I'm going to do the same thing with your help in Washington. Thanks.
Okay, number 9. And this changes the tone a little bit, but federal funding of local projects has been very important to our region. How do you feel about projects such as the proposed marina and 2 harbors? What do you envision as your role in advocating for this type of funding? What kind of projects would you advocate for? And Rick, you're up first.
Oh, yeah. There's a few things I enjoy more. I mean, when you're working on global issues, and I must tell you, one of my passions is world hunger. Every 5 seconds, a child dies of hunger and malnutrition. Well, we're having our meeting here tonight. Some 1,500, 1,600 kids will die of hunger and malnutrition. And years ago, I created the Presidential Commission on World Hunger. And I was a presidential appointee to that commission. And we concluded that with a $100 billion investment, we could have eliminated hunger in the world. Well, of course, that investment was never made. So, you know, you have some far-reaching noble goals and principles that you want to achieve. But you got to find, in the meantime, some ways to get some satisfaction from getting some things done. And there's one of the things I enjoy most is working with county commissioners, working with cities, working with townships. I was a National Township Officers Association Citizen of the Year for work that I did on behalf of townships some years ago. So over in St. Cloud there, I worked on getting funding one of the first HMOs in the state. I wrote the grant applications to fund and get that project off the ground. Like I said, I helped the Bluefin Bay people get their project approved and get that moving. But I don't care if it's a municipal waste treatment facility that needs some upgrading, if it's a community center that will provide some more community services and make the community more attractive for business and investment or living, or if it's the Essential Air Services program that Cravaack voted against, by the way, to make Hibbing or Brainerd or Bemidji or Duluth a more economically viable place for business to locate and conduct their business. I love working with people and solving individual problems, and with communities putting together funding for any one of a variety of programs that will improve their school, their health services, their community living, the quality of their environment, whatever it is. My office will always be open, and I'll be more than ready to grab a hold, and if I have to go down to a particular agency or department and grab someone and to get their attention, I'll do it, and I like doing it. Thank you.
So unlike our current representative, I know the difference between pork barrel spending and important regional projects. And I think it's important that we do know the difference, and we are standing up to people who are trying to classify everything the same way. And I think it's critically important as we're moving on, especially as a state that is sending way more of our money to Washington than we're getting back. We should be getting our fair share. And it should be for things that are going to make a big difference, connect our communities, improve our quality of life, that are the things that really we can't do on our own. And that's something I've been quite successful in doing, bringing people bipartisanly together to get those things done. And right now with the tenor in Washington, it's going to take some extra effort, but I think it's critically important. Now, another piece that I think is important is that especially as we're looking at how we can best utilize our people and our resources, is that we are pushing as hard as we can for projects that have American-made components, that are made with American supplies by a good American labor. And I think if we are doing those things, it's also going to help us with creating a whole lot of other spin-off jobs, as well as the infrastructure or other important regional projects. So I think it's an important thing to do. Ironically, right now, we probably all heard about the Stillwater Bridge, what's going on with that, $690 million. At the same point in time, in just St. Louis County alone, we have 112 bridges that are in need of repair. Well, let's make sure that we're doing smart things so that we are able to best use our resources. Now, Doug's mom is a very frugal person. I'm frugal, but she tops me. She loves triple coupons. Her favorite thing about triple coupon day is when she can actually get them to pay her to buy something. And in a lot of ways, she's really good at it. In a lot of ways, that's what our projects are like right now. We could be going ahead at very low interest rates, be paying for projects. We could have lower costs on our supplies while we're putting our good American, our good Northeastern workers back to work. So I think it's very short-sighted about what's happening in Washington right now. And I got to tell you, I grew up in a Republican family. You know, I used to tell people it was a Republican family. Then I said a moderate Republican family. Now I say an Eisenhower Republican family, but of course he'd be a socialist, right? But he knew the value of making sure that we were doing important projects, right? Let's get back to common sense kinds of investments that are going to strengthen our communities, that are going to connect us, and stop this absolutely polarized nonsense that's going on in Washington that makes it impossible to even do a common sense project that we can't do on our own. Thanks.
I've had some folks along the campaign trail who say, well, Jeff Anderson, it's kind of a big jump, isn't it, from the City Council in Duluth, Minnesota to the U.S. Congress. And I say, no, I don't think it's a big jump at all, and I'll tell you why. First of all, on a city council, you have to work with people who you don't always agree with. People who are far off to the left, far off to the right. But at the end of the day, we have to get together to get things done for our city, because at the city council level, we don't have anybody to pass the buck onto. After Washington's passed it and St. Paul has passed it, it gets to us and we have to do something about it and make tough choices. And so we have to work with people that we don't always agree with. And Washington, D.C. could use a good dose of people who live by that and know how to do that, know how to compromise and don't think it's a dirty word. While I won't compromise my principles, I know that to get things done, sometimes you have to compromise. I also learned as a city councilor that having the federal government as a partner is very important. It's vitally important in order to get things done within your community. Without federal partnership in the city of Duluth, we would still have raw sewage wastewater overflowing into Lake Superior every time it rained. But because the EPA came in, and because of Congressman Oberstar and Congressman Obie, we were able to obtain money, secure money, to be able to build these giant wastewater storage tanks that help alleviate and eliminate those overflows into Lake Superior. And at the same time, create a bunch of jobs, too. Those short-term construction jobs that Republicans don't like to think of as jobs unless it's about building a pipeline. We need a partner in Washington, D.C., someone who understands that local communities within the 8th Congressional District need help, need a partner, need a champion for them. There's an Iron Range mayor who showed Congressman Cravaack his water treatment plant, and said, we need help rebuilding this. It's falling down around us. And the congressman said no. In fact, I don't use the word Representative Cravaack because he does not represent us. He represents special interests and not the people of Finland, not the people of Duluth, not the people of Hibbing or Chisholm or any other city in this district. We need a congressman who is and will work as a partner with local communities to invest in job creation and to rebuild infrastructure, because if there's one way to create jobs right now, it's by investing in our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, the stuff that's under our roads. In regards to the Marina project, I had a meeting earlier today with Two Harbors Mayor Randy Boland, who supports my candidacy, and I wholeheartedly support that and think it's overdue. We need to move forward with those types of projects throughout the 8th Congressional District. We'll create jobs when we do it, and we'll enjoy the benefits of those investments in our infrastructure at the same time.
We're getting good at this. Okay, next question. And this gets back to the mining thing. There is great pressure to mine the Duluth complex at this time of high commodity prices and low employment. Many of the citizens of the area and the nation are concerned that short-term gains may come at the expense of long-term damage to the ecosystem, with changes to law putting our air, waters, and lands at risk. Many elected leaders and candidates have stated that they believe that new technology will make it possible to profitably mine while protecting the environment. What proof do you have or still need that this mining can be done without harming Minnesota's water ecosystem? And let's see.
Thanks. This is an important issue. Clearly, mining has been a big part of the region. And I must say that certainly some of Doug's ancestors and mine happened to have been loggers or miners. There were mill workers, railroad workers, and others. And we know that there is a lot that we are all relying on, including, I think most of us probably got a cell phone in our pockets, and there's things that we're wanting, right? And I think it's important that there's a few things that I try to look at. First off, as I said before, I think we've been sold a bill of goods that you either need to create jobs or you can protect the environment. You can't do both. I think it's important that we are not selling out and that we're finding ways to have solutions that can make things work. Technology has changed so much since the first people who came in mind were mining, right? And so we can be the leaders in this country, and I actually think throughout the world, in how we do mining, that we're doing it in a responsible way. And if we're talking specifically, I think about PolyNet, I think it's important that we use evidence-based, science-based efforts to determine how to best move forward. And I can tell you the company, and I know that Cravaack had a thing in the paper today in Duluth, that was yesterday, right? About how everything is just kumbaya. Well, we just don't know. I mean, I think the company's taking it seriously. I will tell you they were really smart in hiring the former PCA Commissioner Brad Moore to do this. His environmental credentials are superb. And he has certainly assured me that they are not going to release that environmental impact statement until they can meet our standards. And that's an important thing. And so hopefully they're going to be able to come out and answer the questions and demonstrate what they're able to do. Now, in the work I'm doing, I also happen to be a proud steel worker. So I certainly want also to have there be good union jobs. And that's one of the things that, frankly, these companies don't always do. They'll sign project labor agreements, which is great for the building, but how are you guaranteeing that the people who are going to be working there are going to be working in a safe environment and be making good wages in a good environment for them? So I think one of the things that is also critical is that we're looking at the whole projects as we're moving forward. I go back and I bring up lots of questions to them, because I actually think one of the things that's important for us to be doing is asking a lot of how. How will we? How are you going to? You know, it's important that there is financial assurances put aside so that if something happens, regardless of the project, that unlike what happened 100 years ago, that the companies are paying for it. So what I would say is that as we're going through this project, I want to make sure you know that I both believe that we can have important economic development that may be able to be done in a new way, but we have to go ahead and be having the scientific evidence, and the company needs to be able to demonstrate that we can do it safely.
I've said a few times tonight, stated my position on these mines. We mined in northeastern Minnesota for 130 years. I'd like to see us be able to mine safely for another 130 years, protecting our environment and enjoying the economic benefits. I don't believe that it's either or. With that said, we do have to hold corporations accountable. I'm not one. I'm someone who's worked in corporate America for the past 17 years. I know all about corporate America and how much we can trust them. We have to be able to hold these companies accountable and make them do what they say they're going to do. That comes with bankruptcy-proof financial assurances. It becomes an issue of making sure that they meet permitting processes within the existing context of the law. And in the state of Minnesota, we have one of the most stringent permitting processes in the entire country, probably the world. This debate is not going to go away. As long as we continue to buy iPhones and smart cars and things of that nature, even wind turbines, for goodness sake. We talk about investing in wind energy. There's 4 tons of copper in every wind turbine. As long as we continue to build these things, this issue is not going to go away. We sit on the 2nd largest deposit of copper and nickel in the world, and this is going to be mined somewhere. I would want to be a congressman that is going to be an advocate for this type of job creation, if we can do it safely. But we have to be able to protect the environment and do it safely. But I'm not going to be a purist on the issue and say no, never. I think that whether it happens in 2 years or 10 years or 20 years, let's try and work in the direction of being able to do it and do it safely. That's the kind of congressman I'll be. That's the kind of advocate for not just the economy and jobs, but for the environment that I'll be.
I've been an educator. I ran a 19-unit, 3-county Head Start program. I taught school. I've held elective office. I've been involved in a wide variety of volunteer community services. But primarily the last 30 years, I've been a businessman. And so I've been able to see how things come together from a wide variety of perspectives. And I don't mind telling you, as one who has been an advocate from the very beginning in this whole environmental movement, who has had, I think, a rather exceptional and extraordinary record in that regard, I have learned that when it comes to the environment, when it comes to the health and the safety of workers, business doesn't want to do it, and they won't do it unless you make them do it. It's that simple. I was there when we were trying to put in OSHA, and the kids in boat works in Little Falls, their life was over by the time they were 30 because their lungs were full of fiberglass. How many steel workers have died from mesothelioma? So, am I looking to create jobs? Yes, that's where we get our prosperity from. That's what gives us quality communities, quality lives. I make no apologies for being for jobs and for economic development. But it simply has to be done in a way that protects the health and the safety of our workers and protects the air and the water and the quality of our environment. And I've seen cases where it can be done. You all remember when acid rain was destroying our lakes and our forests up here? And it was being caused by sulfuric emissions from the coal-fired power plants and from the automobile exhaust emissions. And all the industry said, "Oh, there's nothing we can do about that." Until we as a nation said, "No, you're going to do it." And guess what? They put the scrubbers on the coal-fired power plants, and they put the catalytic converters on the automobiles, and voila, they scrubbed the sulfur out of the air that was destroying our lakes and our forests. I've seen other cases when they haven't done it. We still got to get them to scrub the mercury out of their emissions. So unless we make industry do it, they won't do it because you're putting themselves at a competitive disadvantage. So I've had many a good business person come to me and say, yeah, employ the best standards you can, because we want to respect the environment. We want to respect our workers, but don't put us at an economic disadvantage. Make us all do it. And that's what we have to do here.
All right, to the last prepared one, and then what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to Tom that has the cards and get some of those in before the 8 o'clock pumpkin turning time. Appreciate you guys for hanging in here. This has been kind of intense. Anyway, I'll make this short. What changes, if any, would you advocate for in the Clean Water Act? And Jeff, you're up first. Keep it clean.
Yeah, I mean, Rick hit it on the head. Make it cleaner. We need to, again, as has been said here this evening, especially here in northern Minnesota, we need to preserve and protect the state of our natural resources and do what we can to improve upon them and make them cleaner, and look to investment and economic development that can potentially have an effect where we make things cleaner and better. When I met with Mayor Boland today talking about some of the plans Two Harbors has for information storage facilities that rely on stability in geography where we don't have earthquakes and hurricanes and things like that, he also talked about the need for a lot of cold water, which Lake Superior has, and that's an industry that can use that cold water and put it back in the lake cleaner than it came out of the lake. Those are things that we need to work on as a region and as a country. So in terms of the Clean Water Act, I don't have specifics to share with you right now, other than the fact that we need to continue to move towards higher standards protecting our natural resources.
Oh, you got a question?
Yeah, the clean water.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
You know, in recent years, we've seen the Republican assault on a lot of the things that we've talked about here, and one of the assaults has been on the regulatory process. The so-called job-killing regulations. And I tried to emphasize before that, number one, these are not job-killing regulations. These are job-creating regulations. In the case of what I just mentioned, somebody's got to build the scrubber, somebody's got to install the scrubber, somebody's got to maintain the scrubber, and somebody's got to replace the scrubber and do it all over again when the scrubber wears out. During the 70s and the 80s, the environmental industry was the strongest sector of our economy for several decades. Created more jobs than any other sector of the economy. So we as Democrats need to stop retreating and acting like, you know, we're somehow afraid. And we need to step up and say, no! These are not job-killing regulations. These are job-creating regulations. And even more importantly, these are regulations that improve the quality of our lives, extend our lives, improve the quality for our future and for future generations. And I got to tell you, there's been some backtracking. There's been some backtracking on some of the Clean Air Act standards. And, you know, I can't sit here right at the moment and recite each one of them in detail, but there has been some retreat. And some of it has come from the Democrats. I'm a Democrat. I'm proud to be a Democrat, but I'll be damned if I'll take a back seat when the Democrats are heading in the wrong direction. You know, I'll be one of the first to stand up and say no. When our leaders want to take us into a war in Iraq, I'll say no. When our leaders want to give Wall Street executives some bonuses, I'll say no. I'm not afraid to take on these damn Republicans, but I'll take on the Democrats too when they got it coming. And there's been some retreat on this Clean Air Act, and I'm going to speak up on that too and make sure that it doesn't happen. Thank you.
things have gotten so bad in Washington that recently there's been some legislation that has been trying to be moved forward finally on ocean restoration. But they couldn't do it as anything that related to the ocean because of what so many particularly Republicans are pushing right now. The way they did it is they're trying to get it in as part of the Gulf restoration work that's happening in the wake of what happened with Katrina. That is kind of, frankly, they're trying to find creative ways to move anything forward. Right now we have so much defense that we have to do on making sure that we have rules to be gone by, common sense rules. I've already said before, I don't believe in unnecessary rules. I mean, I think, there's times that, fine, let's get rid of outdated, outmoded, duplicative regulations. But the way the right talks right now, you and I wouldn't be able to be breathing. I don't know about some of you, but I've got asthma, and I do live near one of those coal-powered plants. And I got to tell you, there's still some major issues with what's being emitted around the country. And it only took the so-called, the Clean Skies Act, when they were going backwards on regulations. We truly are under assault right now. I liken it to when our kids used to do domino rallies, you put all the dominoes up and then you push them up. The right has spent the last 40 years trying to find ways to undo things that were started 60 years ago. Whether it has been about clean air or clean water, whether it's been about other environmental protections, whether it's been about labor rights or women's rights or civil rights or anything else. And right now they have pushed on the dominoes and they're going. And it's up to us to figure out how not to let them use all of these issues, and we've had a great array of issues, to be splintering us. And this is a key one. Now this is something obviously Jim was working on in his last year in office. It's something the right tried to come at him on. And we need to stand firm together that our water is just too important, whether it's not just Lake Superior, but the rest of our Great Lakes, whether it's the Mississippi or other rivers, or it's our well more than 10,000 lakes. So as we are looking to the future, one, we got to make sure we're not letting them take away what's been decades of work to get to where we are. So it's defense. We need to be doing offense because certainly we can create new markets as we are putting the right regulations in place. An example I would bring up is Samsung, who has recently said China wants to be like Samsung because Samsung is going to invest about $10 billion over the next decade, $20 billion over the next decade on things like LED lights, among others, because they know because of regulations that there is now actually a need for the demand. So we can move that forward. But what I really fear is whether or not we're actually going to reauthorize anything and what that looks like. And it's really important that we have people coming together and say this is a part of who we are. And for the sake of our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids, we deserve to make sure that we have the best and most effective regulations in place.
Okay, we're going to hang in here for another half hour if you're with us, and Tom's going to take it from here.
I want to thank Phil for his job as moderator. It's been a long day for him, and I appreciate all of his stuff. Okay, this first one somebody wrote, and I didn't write any of these, by the way. And I know I've heard this a few times because I'm a state committeeman and I'm a delegate to the 8th Congressional District Committee and all that stuff. And the question is, will you honor the endorsement process? And that is not run if not endorsed in the caucus system.
I said from the very moment I entered into this race that I would abide by the endorsement for several reasons. Number one is I think Tarryl Clark and Jeff Anderson are wonderfully good, moral, successful, important public servants. And if they're the endorsed candidate, I'd be proud to support them and do everything I can to get them elected. Because this election contest is not about me. It's not about any one of them. It's about you. It's about us. It's about where we are going. I believe in the endorsement system. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. But I'll tell you, the Congress is made up mostly of millionaires. Had it not been for an endorsement system, I doubt I ever would have been elected to the United States Congress. I doubt that I ever would have even considered it, not knowing I had a body of people who were ready to contribute and give money and pass out literature and campaign and to work for me. That is very, very important. And then secondly, it's very difficult to defeat an incumbent member of the Congress. I've run as a challenger, and I've run as an incumbent, and believe me, it's a lot easier running as an incumbent. Very seldom does an incumbent member of the Congress ever get defeated. You've got to have everything going your way. And if we're united on May 5th behind an endorsed candidate, then we've got May, and we've got June, and we've got July, and we've got August to define ourselves relative to Mr. Chip Cravaack. Otherwise, if we have to wait till August, we're going to be spending time and money. I don't expect that there would be any division, because I think we all like each other. At least I'll speak for myself. I sure like them. But there's always the potential for division, and it's wasted time. It's wasted money. And then you find yourself finally getting ignited in August, and you don't get the kind of help and monies you can get from the National Party till September, October, and then you're trying to define yourself in the middle of a media storm. I can't imagine what it's going to look like this year with these super PACs and the United Citizens. My kids were all excited about Dad running for Congress. I said, you might not be so excited next fall when the big money super PACs, who you don't know who they are, start telling the world what an awful, no good for nothing good Nick your dad is. We need that time in May and July and August to define ourselves, because we've got a lot of good qualities, and if we have the time to define them, we'll win this thing in November. If we don't, we're making it more difficult. So that's why I support the endorsement.
I'll just be quick and say I haven't decided yet for a number of reasons. I'm happy to share those during the mingle time if you'd like. But while I respect the endorsement process, and as someone who's served on the 8th Congressional District DFL Executive Board and been active within the party for years in a leadership position in the 7th Senate District, I haven't decided yet, because we don't know if all of us will abide. And I think if one candidate decides not to abide, then that rule shouldn't be held to any of us. With that said, there's some history in terms of the endorsement. Not only do we have a governor today who was not the endorsed DFL candidate. In 1974, Jim Oberstar was not the endorsed DFL candidate, went on to win a primary and serve the people of Northeastern Minnesota proudly for 36 years.
And I'm very proud to have the first two people who were delegates for Jim Oberstar helping me out my campaign. So that's a pretty good thing. You know, I've worked for a long time, as has Doug, on trying to strengthen our party and really bring people in. And part of what really motivates me about running right now is about how Washington has lost sight of our values and our priorities, and that we absolutely must win. These Tea Partiers might have won the last election, but if we're not fighting back, they really do win. This is the time we have to. Now, I know something about those expensive races. I was in the very most expensive race ever, anywhere in the country. In case you didn't know, I am the scariest person in America and also the most powerful. The only problem, of course, is I probably would have gotten the president and Congress to do a few things a little bit differently if that was really true. And so things have really changed over the decades. It's not like it was in the 70s. It's a lot different now. It costs a lot of money to run, and I believe both that it's kind of, Doug keeps talking about a three-legged stool. We want to go ahead and energize our base. We want to run an aggressive campaign by having the money to do it. And then, frankly, we need to be organizing now in a much broader group of people who are probably going to, unfortunately, show up at our precinct caucuses. So I've always worked for the endorsement. I want it. For part of the reason why Jeff just said it, I want to make sure that I get it. But at the same time, I don't think right now that the endorsement alone is enough to win this race. I come from the southern part of this region, and I can tell you, I know that if we're not working right now on reaching out to the general election population, we easily could lose this seat because the population has changed so much. With the growth on the southern part, where it's much more conservative, with the outside money coming in, and frankly, because there hasn't been a real race in 40 years, we need to be organizing and reaching out and empowering people as much as possible. So my focus right now is solely on beating Chip Cravaack and making sure we're getting our priorities back in Washington. And anybody who wants to come and work with us, we want it. My family likes saying that I'll work with the rock, if the rock will work with me. And that's in a way how we have to win this race. Now, the Senate district I won hadn't been held by a Democrat for a very long time. And partially how we really changed those things was not just getting all the Democrats, we had to get all of the independents, and we had to convince some sensible Republicans to come with us. This guy is slick. He is slick, he has drunk the Tea Party Kool-Aid, and we have to make sure that people do not fall into the trap that they have laid. Now, I'm proud to be endorsed by Emily's List. They're working and bringing people together, lots of small donors coming together, because right now there's 17% of the people in Congress happen to be women. Now, I don't want people to vote for me because I'm a woman, but I'm going to go out and organize and energize women. As I said, I've got the support of the committee to preserve Social Security and Medicare. We've got to be getting seniors, regardless of party, who believe right now that our seniors ought to be protected. And as I said, and then I'm going to stop, we need to be making sure that we are bringing labor together and other groups. So I hope that you'll join me as we go through re-energize the party, but let's bring in a whole lot of people. And my very last comment is, one of the really hard parts about all this is we're going to have precinct caucuses before we even know where any lines are. So I got to tell you, we're reaching out to a much broader geographic area than there probably is going to end up being in this race.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to get 2 more questions in, but to do that, I'm going to ask the timekeeper to give them 1 minute to answer the next couple of questions, and then that'll be it. And that won't be easy. These are pretty good questions. Next one, and I'm not sure, I think Jeff goes first next time, is that right?
I think so. Tarryl was last.
Getting America back to work depends on candidates having access to a pool of qualified candidates. However, higher education for many has become prohibitively expensive, and many recent college graduates say that their education did not properly prepare them for the job market. What are your plans for making college affordable and for assuring that our education system teaches appropriate skills for a changing job market?
Real quickly, in this country, we don't just have a spending problem, we have a revenue problem. And the wealthiest Americans are getting by without paying their fair share. And because of that, we're seeing our tuition at colleges continue to increase. We're seeing that it's harder and harder for middle-class Americans to get an education. And I think that that's part of a plan to keep us and dumb down our society. I truly do. I think that we need to make sure that every kid who wants to can go to college, whether that's a technical college or whether that's a 4-year college. I went to college on a Pell Grant and GI Bill and tuition reimbursement. I remember going to elementary school in this state and high school in this state when we bragged that we had the greatest schools, the best schools in the country. We need to get back to those days. I was at Hibbing Taconite the other day talking to them about recruiting employees. They have trouble getting some high school or technical school graduates to pass a basic science test. That's sad. We have to stop that. We need to invest in our schools from K through 12 and then our post-secondary schools to make sure that even kids getting out of high school have skills necessary to be able to enter our workforce.
Well, I wouldn't have been able to go to college if there hadn't been financial aid, period. My parents were realtors. It was often feast or famine in our house. And just truly, if there hadn't been grants and frankly some loans, and I worked hard and got scholarships, I couldn't have gone. So What I have noticed, though, and I graduated in 1983, and what I've noticed since then is that the grants haven't kept up with where the middle class is, and way too many people can't qualify for any type of aid. So from a federal government standpoint, the single most important thing we can do is make sure that there's access to grants, as well as the kinds of reforms in student loans that the president has done. I'm a big believer if you're doing public service after you get out of school, you should be able to get loan forgiveness, and hopefully the loans will go away. And I think we need to be making sure that we're doing research at our research institutions. I've also been a very strong advocate on early ed. Let's close the gap early. I know we don't have much time. Close the gap early. I agree with Art Rolnick. It is the single best public investment we can be making. Let's make sure the federal government is allowing our teachers to teach and our kids to learn. It's about our school districts and our parents making decisions, not the federal government. But we should be funding special ed, something I worked on when I was at the Capitol. So I have a long history of working on early ed through higher ed, and want to continue to do that with your help in Congress.
The best investment we ever make in life is in education, whether it be early childhood, where they say you do get your best bang for the buck, but we need it all the way on up through college and graduate school. I think I mentioned earlier I'm the immediate past president of the Central Lakes College Foundation. We raise scholarship money there. Over the last, since Tim Pawlenty, we've seen our funding cut in half. We've seen our student population double. We've seen our costs quadruple. And we've seen our tuition go out of sight. It costs you $7,000 to $8,000 a year now to go to a community college. It's getting out of reach for the average person in this country. In my day, I was able to work and raise a family and pay for college all at the same time. We need to start investing in our education. I was one of the sponsors of the so-called Minnesota Miracle. Did you hit the sign? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, just 30
okay.
seconds. You got 30 more.
Oh, okay. I was one of the sponsors that revolutionized the funding and the fairness in Minnesota elementary and secondary education. But we need to expand Pell Grants. We need to devise forgiveness programs for student loans. And we need to start funding education in this country. If you neglect education and educating your people, you're abandoning your future and you're abandoning your people.
It's 1:45. Just so you know, Tom, it's 1:45.
It's 1:45.
I said two more questions.
Okay.
Okay, one last question and then we'll be done. I hope this could be shorter. What do you know about food labeling or organic foods and your views on food farmer policies?
Okay, this is not fair to do in 1 minute. No. But this is, something that is critically important as we're moving forward. We got some people on the right who want to get rid of anything that's going to help us know whether our food is safe, period. They also want to make sure that they are, I'd say, destroying literally the labor protections that are also involved. So those are two pieces of it. But to give a really good example of a regulation that doesn't make any sense that relates to food is UMD has recently started replacing a lot of flours with vegetables. And we're starting to see this right in schools too. I mean, I'm a big believer in what we can do on local foods. And what has happened, though, is they can't actually serve any of that food in essentially their dining hall. Why? Because they're not a preferred vendor for themselves. And it would make sense if we were talking about a brownfield, but we're not. We're talking about land that has been made sure that it's environmentally safe, and our schools can't do the same thing. So I think it's really important as we're moving forward to be protecting and having adequate resources on food safety. It is one of the things we usually hope, we think, that we are going to have safe food. Having the opportunity when you're labeling things that we actually know what has gone into it in terms of not just calories, but what does it really mean for us. And if something's labeled organic or it's healthy or something else, that we actually know what that means. Because the food industry has really gone ahead and tried to confuse us with their labeling. So I think we can do that. We've got some pretty big companies, though, that want to get in the way.
Francis Moore LePay taught us that hunger and food and health and life expectancies was more a function of land ownership, land use and than it was of perhaps any other factor. And I believe we need to take the largesse in our agricultural programs today and turn it towards small scale, community-based, organic agriculture, and start finding ways to get away from the fungicides and the herbicides and the rodenticides and the pesticides and all the other killicides that modern agriculture seems to devise, and develop community-based markets. And we need to do that here in this country, and we need to start doing what we can in our foreign policy to help the rest of the world to do that. And that's how we'll have healthier lives, healthier food, and less hunger in the world today.
I'll just say that we need to continue to adequately fund the Food and Drug Administration to make sure that those modes of food labeling that educate our public are protected. And I think we should take it even further. As somebody who knows a little something about calories, I think that our restaurants in this country should be required through a regulatory process to clearly state the caloric intake and the nutritional impact of the food that they're serving, whether that be McDonald's or some cafe within a community like Two Harbors or Duluth. It's very important that we focus on fighting childhood obesity and educating the public through proper labeling. And one of the other things, just quickly, is we have to continue, especially in larger cities, to focus on urban farming. That is a good way to create some jobs. There's a perfect model in the city of Milwaukee. It's a great way to create jobs, but it's a great way to put the food source closer to the people who need it.
Aren't we lucky? That's one side of that coin. On the other hand, we have I think you guys are just great. All of you are. And it's going to make the choice very difficult. We want to all get, I feel like I know you a lot better than I did 3 hours ago. And I hope you all enjoyed having this sort of a forum in our community. I don't remember in the 40 years I've lived here that we've ever had anything like this in our community. And what do we all have to remember? What date? February 7th. Yes, for our precinct caucuses. And I hope you all attend. And there's going to be a straw vote that day on the 8th District candidates. So be sure and attend. Thank you.